Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. It's we're learning. We should have the base of English immediately. Okay, today we're going to start Lamed Aleph Amud Beis by Rav Ashi Yomer. What's going on over here? We had a statement from Rabbi Oven. He said that if someone shoots an arrow 4 Amos in Rosh Hashanah and it tears silk while it's going, so he said that he's exempt. Now the truth is that the tearing of the silk took place before the malacha was performed. The malacha was performed at the end of the 4 Amos. The tearing of the silk was in the middle. So he said that it was a akira that was tzarech hanacha. It was all part of one malacha. We had a question. Gain of kiss b'Shabbos. It says that he's chayiv. Someone steals a wallet on Shabbos is chayiv. Why? Because he's chayiv for the gneva before he took it outside. If he was dragging it, then it would be different. Then the Issa Shabbos and Issa gneva were coming together. We said, why? When he picks it up, you're telling me that he's acquiring it, and the Shabbos when he carries it out is later. The picking it up was also to carry it out. So we gave these answers that he stopped to rest, and then he carried it out at the end. And we said, when he's pulling it out, what are we dealing with? He's pulling it outside. We said that everything is coming together. Is it going into Rosh Hashanah? So then there's Issa Shabbos, but he doesn't acquire it then, because you don't acquire with Mashiach and Rosh Hashanah. So if it's coming into Tzidei Rosh Hashanah, well, and did we say Tzidei Rosh Hashanah? Then we had a machlekes if Tzidei Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah or not. So, okay, we said that it was like Rabbi Eliezer that says Tzidei Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah, so he should be chayav for Shabbos. So he's chayav for Shabbos, but how does he acquire it? So he says no. You can acquire it there in the Tzidei Rosh Hashanah, even though it's considered Rosh Hashanah for Shabbos. So it has different statuses. That's where we ended off. Rav Ashi says that we're not dealing with a kinyan Mashiach. Mashiach is when it's being drawn or being pulled. But over there we have a problem, which Rishus you're acquiring it in. We're dealing with a kinyan Hagbah. Okay, how does that work? When he gets to the edge of the Rosh Hashanah, the edge of the person's property, which is meeting Rosh Hashanah, he pulls it off the property and onto his hand. And because his hand, according to Rava, as it says, is Kidarava, the hand of a person is considered like its own Rishus. So that's considered like a Hagbah. And so he's acquiring with Hagbah, which means lifting it up. And that works in Rosh Hashanah. It would even work in the Rishus of the Bailam, Hagbah. So for sure it works in Rosh Hashanah. Okay, now Ravacha Masni Hachi. The way we just taught this was the way Ravacha learned it. However, Ravina teaches it different. Li'olam dafka Rosh Hashanah. Really, he did pull it out into Rosh Hashanah. If he pulls it into Rosh Hashanah, then the basic question in the Rosh Hashanah is that he doesn't acquire it then, because pulling in Rosh Hashanah, pulling means that you're taking it into your Rishus. Rosh Hashanah is not your Rishus; it's everyone's Rishus. We're looking for a case where you're violating Shabbos and acquiring at the same moment, and it's stealing. We're talking about if you get the punishment for the more severe one, not for the lesser one, right? So it has to come simultaneous. So Ravina says, really, he's taking it into Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah namikana, and he holds that you acquire with Mashiach and Rosh Hashanah. Well, it's a chiddush. And they actually get their logic from the Mishnah itself. The Tanan was taught in the Mishnah. If he's pulling an animal, he's pulling it out of the Rishus where he's taking it from. He's stealing it from. Umes. And as he's pulling it out, it dies. This is really bad luck. He's trying to steal an animal and it dies on him. So, Rishus Bailim, Meis B'Rishus Bailam is pater. It died before he even got it out. He's exempt. Now he's exempt for paying for the animal that just died. The reason is because this was an inus. Now, if someone steals something, he's chayiv in everything. There's no like, oh, but he's a shaymer, or say it's not a shaymer. He takes full responsibility for everything, and he has to give back the original item. Even if an accident happens, that's no excuse. So, but the thing is over here that he wasn't kaineth yet. It died before he even got it out. Still higbiyai, but let's say he lifted it up. Must have been a smaller animal. Or he took it out, Mirshas Bailam, from the owner's possession, umeis, and then it died. Then he's chayiv. Okay. Now we have to take he's kind of bagba, or he's kind of by taking it out. Now, Ravina Dayak Miresha. Ravina looked at the first line of this, and he learns that you're kind of B'Rishus Harabim, that you acquire it in Rishus Harabim. Ravacha Dayak Miseifa. Ravacha looked at the Seifa, and he learns that you don't acquire it in Rishus Harabim. Ravina Dayak Miresha. Ravina looks at the Resha at the first line of the statement. It goes like this: if he's pulling it, and he's on his way out, but it died, the animal died while it's still in the property of the original owner. So he's pater. Okay. Taima de meis b'Rishus Bailam. Why is he pater? Because it died in the owner's property. But if he would have taken it into the Rishus Harabim, umeis, then chayiv. See, you'd be kainet in Rishus Harabim. You're kainet everywhere other than Rishus Bailam, which includes the Rishus Harabim. Ravina's point here is that pulling an object in Rishus Harabim is a kinyan. Okay. And his diuk is because it says only if it's meis B'Rishus Bailam is he pater. But if it's not Rishus Bailam, even Rishus Harabim, you'd be chayiv. Ravacha Dayak Miseifa. Ravacha learns from the end of the Mishnah. It says, the second line. It says, if he lifted it or he took it out, well, what happens by agba? Ma'agba dasilur say just like when he lifts it up, it comes into his domain. Also, when he takes it out, it has to come in his domain, and not in a Rishus Harabim. It doesn't come into his domain in a Rishus Harabim. Yeah. Ravacha kasha reisha, Ravina kasha seifa. He did very nice over here. Everyone has a diuk. The only problem is that they're contradictory. So there's a question on each one from the other one's implication. It says Reisha l'Ravacha like kasha. The Reisha is not a question to Ravacha, but there it says that if he takes it out, if it dies in the domain of the owner, of the original owner, then the robber is exempt. We said, oh, but if it would have gone into the Rishus Harabim, then the robber would be chayiv. It says, that doesn't tell you that automatically he got it if it goes into Rishus Harabim. If it goes into Rishus Harabim, it's still B'Rishus Bailam. It didn't tell you where he acquired it. Seifel Ravina like kasha. In the end, it's not a question to Ravina. What did the end say? That if he lifted up or he took it out. No, we said just like lifting it up means he brings it into his own domain. So taking it out means that he has to take it into his own domain and not Rishus Harabim. It says Seifel Ravina like kasha because he made a comparison that I don't have to accept. Those are two different things. Hagba works by just lifting it up, and Haitzah doesn't works even if it's not into his own domain, even if he just pulls it in Rishus Harabim. Maybe the machlekes has to do with what is the kinyan mashicha. Is it showing of ownership or is it bringing it into your rishus? What is a kinyan? Is it the behavior? Is it yeah? Is it the behavior, or is it or is it you're bringing it into your domain? The behavior is the behavior bringing it into your domain, or does it have to be in the physical, in the location of your domain? That's really the question. Okay, we're going to enter into a new sugi now. before we spoke about kares together with payment. Yeah. And we said that we're gonna, besides for the Reb Nachman ben Akana, our Mishnah holds that you pay, and kares is not considered a more severe punishment. That when there's two punishments that are coming together, our Mishnah holds that if it's kares and payment, you do the payment, and the kares that's coming from heaven. That's not, it doesn't go in the same, it's not in the same calculation. Yeah, Reuven said it would be like under civil or not civil, state or federal, state or federal. It's on different cheshbon. They don't mix the two. Okay.
The state includes federals.
I don't know the ins and outs. Lav dafka apparently. Criminal and civil. Well, criminal would be is federal, right? Is criminal is state. Oh, really? Uh-huh.
In our philosophy, somebody shoots somebody, you kind of you don't also pay for the church.
Uh-huh.
Whereas in America, they go,
Uh-huh.
you can get killed and.
Uh-huh. When someone shoots someone, he gets it's under the state court or it's under the it could be under either, really?
Depends on what, whether it is, or depends on what it's federal.
Also, the state person who wants to prosecute them. So, do you remember the whole story about O.J. Simpson? Yeah. He was prosecuted for the crime of murder.
Right.
He was freed. But then he was sued civilly.
Right.
And he was found guilty. You know, they go down different tracks.
But he wasn't killed first, and then you had to pay.
Yeah, correct.
Or is
But
that?
it didn't work that way.
Yeah, his
Okay.
state.
It's supposed to be the state of the murder.
So now we go into another story. It says over here, if someone lived with his sister, who was still at that time a virgin, or he lived with his aunt, his father's sister, etc., all of these close relatives. Now over there's a problem, because the rule is that if someone rapes or seduces a young girl that's in between 12 and 12 and a half, he has to pay the fine to the father, and he also has to marry her, has to support her for the rest of his life.
Which is worse.
But I mean, she could refuse.
She could refuse.
Refuse, huh?
She could refuse.
She refused.
The Gemara has a problem, has a question on this, because the Mishnah said clearly that he has to pay the fine. Problem is, for a minute, we have a contradiction. Elohein Aleikin. The following, if they're warned, there would be malchus, which means lashes. Habal achese, someone that lives with his sister, valachesaviv, or with his aunt, valachesimai, or with his other aunt, his mother sister, valachesisti, or his sister-in-law, his wife's sister, while his wife is alive. Val eshesachim, and on his other sister-in-law, that means his brother's wife, doesn't matter, unless it's a mitzvah of yibam, it's a prohibition. Val eshes achi aviv, or his other aunt, that's his father's brother's wife. Other ones were the sisters, the father's sister, the mother's sister. Now we have the father's brother's wife. Val anida, or a woman that's a nida, it's a masnida. All of these would be kares without warning, and with warning would be malchus. Right? The Bezdin would take over if they were warned. Yeah. Oh, it looks like a Mishnah.
Wow.
It's a different mission somewhere else.
It's a Mishnah in Malchus. B'kaimalan, and we've established the ain't like a mishalim. Can't pay. You can't get the lashes and also have to pay. The problem is our Mishnah says that you have to pay. The Mishnah over there says that you get lashes. We have a rule that it doesn't work together. Comes out, it's a contradiction. Can't do both. Amarula like kasha. Ula answers this question. There's different ways. I mean, if you think about it, there's different ways of answering it. Ula answers, kan b'chese nara, kan b'chese begeres. It depends how old the girl is. If the girl is in between 12 and 12 and a half, so then the payment would go to the father. So you have to pay. If she's over 12 and a half, she's a begeres. So then there's just malchus, there's just lashes. There's no payment, there's just lashes. Well, payment really goes to the father. Yeah, there's no payment there. Yeah. Not the payment that we're talking about. There's other issues that we'll see in a minute, but not the 50 shkalim and all of that. Okay, the Gemara says, okay, I hear your answer, but there is another payment that there is, even if the girl is older than 12 and a half. What you just told me that if there's no payment because she's over 12 and a half, then there's malchus. If there is a payment because she's under 12 and a half, then there's a payment, no malchus. Problem is that I'm going to show you that there's a payment that's applicable even above 12 and a half. There's an embarrassment, and there's also a degrading of in her value, which takes place if she was sold as a slave or whatever. So that loss, first of all, the embarrassment is its own payment. It's called baishas. It's a type of knas, it's a type of fine that we pay. Someone damages someone else in an embarrassing way, he has to pay that. And there's also the pagam, that now she's worth less, so he has to pay that. Gemara answers b'shaita. We're talking about a case over here. Why is there no payment and there's only lashes? Because we're dealing with an imbecile, and she doesn't get embarrassed. She doesn't even know if she's getting embarrassed or not. And she's also, why is there no pagam? She doesn't get worth less. Rashi said that there's no pagam. Yeah, she wouldn't be sold as a slave. Anyway, so there's no pagam. Gemara says, Katsara, what about the pain? She was just raped. There's suffering. The Gemara answers b'mefuta. She wasn't raped. She was seduced. Okay, so now this is what's called an akimta.
How do we know that she was?
Well, that's the interesting thing here. We don't know anything. What we're doing is we have a question. We have a contradiction. So in order to resolve a contradiction, we're creating a scenario where it would resolve our question. So what's the scenario that resolves the question? We're saying that it's a case, it's a doichik, usually you would like the Mishnah to refer to every possible case, but sometimes you're stuck and it can't refer because we have a contradicting. So what we'll do is we'll squeeze it into one specific scenario. We'll say that's what it's talking about. That's what we're doing here. So the Mishnah that says that there's lashes is talking about, first of all, she's over 12, so there's no fine. She's over 12 and a half, so there's no fine. But what about the pain? Not the pain. What about the embarrassment and the loss of value? So she was raped. It doesn't have the same value. So we said that we're talking about she's an imbecile. But what about the pain and the what would say? No, just the pain. I mean, we said okay, she wasn't raped. She was seduced. It says hashtadasas lahachi. If that's the way you're going to resolve this. So then why do you have to say that she's over 12 and a half, even if she's 12? We're talking about, let's say that she's an orphan. So there is no father to give the money to. So who would get the money? She would get the money. The only problem is she was seduced. Seduced means that she did it willingly. If there's a father around, then the father says, that was not considered consent. She's only 12.
Yeah.
I'm the one that gets the money when I marry her off, the father would
But
say.
if she's old, or there's no such thing as.
If it's older, then there's no money being seduced. If there's younger than 12 and a half, then there is money that goes to the father. But if she's an orphan, then there's no father to take the money. So it should really go to her. Can't give it to her. She just consented. What's she going to do? Consent and then take the money for it? She can't do that. So there's no payment. So you don't have to say Ula is telling us that it's the difference between those two Mishnayos. In order to resolve them was that the age difference Doesn't have to be an age difference. There's no money. And there's no lashes. There's no, okay.
It's not this peculiar circumstance.
Right.
Indicate therefore there's no contradiction.
Right. Whatever the case is that what Ula is telling me is that if there is any sort of payment, then there's no lashes. Alma, what we see from this is Kosavar Ula, that Ula holds, Kol Hechadek Amaman Malkus. If there's two punishments that come together, Memayna Meshalim, Milka Leilaki. That you pay the money, but you don't get the Malkus. Because which one is, if I would have a rule of Kamle B'derabmine, that we only give the more severe punishment and not the lesser punishment, so then according to Ula, you know what that rule would be? That you pay the money and they don't get the Malkus. This is probably the opinion that I'd rather get, is that that some people, they would rather lose their life rather than lose their money. Right? That's a,
Very good.
what is
I
that?
mean, it's a comedian. Where he sticks him up, says, "You like you want to think about that." That was an old, the old comedian.
We need Dr. Steiner. There's a Bekias. Okay. Minole Lulaha. Where does Ula get this from? That when there's a payment and lashes, the person only gets the payment, only gets the obligation to pay, not the lashes. So Gemara says, Gomer Mechayvel B'Chaveri. We have a source. If someone hits his friend, we know the Torah tells us that if someone hits his friend, he has to pay 5 different types of payments. One is the damages that he caused. What's the damages? How much he's worth less because of he hurt him and he's maybe can't function the same way. He's worth less as a slave. There's the pain that we learned about that he has to pay, right? There's pain that he went through. How much a person would take to have that same thing done to him with painkillers or without painkillers. So this obviously didn't give him painkillers before he hit him. The loss of work, the doctor bills, and right, and also the embarrassment. Sometimes there's embarrassment when a person gets hurt. Yeah, it could be. It could be. It depends. It depends. It could be. It depends how he was embarrassed. It could be he hit him and not everyone and not a lot of people were there. Could be he wasn't. He was a child that doesn't get as embarrassed as an adult. Right?
Value to this text is okay. 2 million I won't, but if you give me 5, I'll consider it.
Right.
Mom, it's just like,
Right. It's like how much it would be insured for if he has the job like that.
yeah,
A person that's
said it's being received to cut your arm. That's
no, that's for tzar. We don't ask him how much he would agree. For
a market value.
no, yeah, there's a market value. Yeah, there would be a difference. Someone that's a chazan, versus someone that's a dentist. His arm. What's the value of his arm? There's a big difference there. It depends if he's going to be bought as a slave. What's the master going to have him do? So that would be a difference. Where we said that we ask him a question, that was for tsar. For tsar, we say, what would the person rather? Would he rather it cut off with the painkiller or without the painkiller? Obviously, with the painkiller. Now, how much are you willing to pay to have that painkiller? So that's the value of the tsar. We just evaluated how much that pain was worth to him. Okay. So we have a rule that that someone that damages someone else, he hits someone else, he has to pay. Now, we also have a rule that there's malchus if he hits someone else. Where do we know that there's malchus from? Because the Torah tells us that when the Bezdin is giving malchus, you can only give him 40, not more. Really means 39, but not more than that. And there's a rule, lo yosef. He can't add to the malchus. Okay. So there's a negative prohibition. That means that if someone does hit someone, he would get malchus. And Memayna Mishalim Milkalei Lucky. And when he comes to court, the guy says, Ruvain hit Shimon. Shimon says, he owes me money. The court doesn't say, well, we're just going to give him lashes and you don't have to get paid. No, he's going to have to pay. There's Reuben's going to have to pay Shimon. See, Ula has a very good source that when there's two punishments that are coming to court, the money is the one that gets paid, not the malchus. Okay. Seems like a good proof. Where it says it's a little bit of a problem there. I could say that really mammon is not the money is not necessarily stricter than malchus, only by that case of chayvel b'chaveira. By chayvel b'chaveira, it's stricter, and therefore that's what he's going to have to pay because there's 5 things that he has to pay. But if it was just one, yeah. So therefore, but if there was just one payment, then how do you know that if there's a knas versus malchus, that the malchus isn't going to be stricter? Maybe the malchus is going to be stricter. If you have to pay 5 times for the same thing, that's a different story.
Well, can you just say someone gets more or less malchus?
Malchus is going to be 39.
So it's just no matter what, no matter how severe.
Right. And he says now, and I even have another way of viewing this. Look at this Gemara. The Gemara says, "Bima mayna lakula." And even if you want to tell me that money is anyways always going to be less, but I have another problem. But when it comes to chayvel, is going to be more lenient when it comes to the malchus. Why? Because when it comes to malchus, I know that the bezdin is allowed to give malchus. It means bezdin is allowed to do chayvel. It means chayvel is not so serious. Sure, what the Gemara means with this. It's even if I'm going to say that money is not as strict. Even we're saying now that money is much more strict by chayvel. By chayvel, money is more because you have to pay 5 times. But even if I'm not going to say that, even if I would say that money is always lenient, but I'm going to say that malchus by chayvel is also lenient, is even less than the money. Why? Because I do find that the bezdin itself will administer malchus. That means that malchus is not so. In other words, we have a heter for malchus. Sometimes it's allowed. When is it allowed? When the bezdin does it. So is the Gemara saying? We can't be saying that malchus isn't as strict. The Gemara is saying that chayvel cannot be a proof for anything because by chayvel, that malchus that you have by chayvel is sometimes permissible anyway. So that's why you have to pay. Right.
Violating relatively a law.
Right, but since you see that the bezdin, since the bezdin is allowed to give malchus, so that means that sometimes malchus is not such a strong prohibition because it has a leniency. How do they write it here?
And if payment of money is more.
1 second. That's another point. Okay. If in a stringent case of injuring another, one receives the more lenient punishment. Well, the more so, he received the more lenient punishment in the less stringent case. Nevertheless, one who injures another cannot serve as a paradigm for cases of liability for both money and lashes. The reason is that there is also a lenient aspect with regard to injuring another, as it is permitted in departure from its norm in court. The court administers lashes injuring those convicted. The leniency is that its application is selective. Okay, now Okay. The Ritva asked the question, can there be any comparison between one who criminally assaults another to an officer of the court who performs a mitzvah by administering lashes to a convicted criminal? That's the question that you're thinking. He explains that despite this anomaly, the contention of as this prohibited action is permitted in departure from its norm is independent of the nature of the leniency. It merely points to the fact that the prohibition is not in effect in all circumstances. Okay. Well,
That answers your question.
So that was clear.
Whatever the case is, we don't have a support for Ula that lashes is knocked away and money is the payment, just because we see that by Chayvel that he has to pay and he doesn't get lashes. Someone that bruises another person. Okay, so the Gemara says, well, Elagamar mi Edim Zayman. We do have another source where we can learn this from. Edim Zayman. Edim Zayman is when two witnesses come to court and they say that so-and-so owes, Ruvain owes Shimon money. Ruvain owes Shimon money. Why? Because Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon on Tuesday. Well, two more witnesses come to court and say, how do you know that Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon on Tuesday? When Tuesday you were with us in another state, you're somewhere else. You couldn't have done it. Well, it turns out that the first two witnesses were just trying to cause Ruvain harm. And because how much money was it? It was $100. So therefore, they have to pay the $100. Those two witnesses have to pay the $100. Okay, but what about the Malkus? They don't get Malkus. They just have to do what they wanted to do, which was they have to do the payment. See, the payment overrides the Malkus. He just does the payment. He doesn't get Malkus. Which says 1 second. Why is it so strict over there? They don't even need to be warned. They have to pay. No one warned the Eidim Zayman. And if you're going to say that the reason is not because of strictness, actually what we're doing is we're giving the more lenient one. Money is more lenient. But if that's the case, then we would say Shekin Layasa Maisa. The reason why they pay is because they didn't really do an action. Now there's a whole chiddush over here that there is a possibility that Eidim Zayman could get Malkus in certain cases, but whatever the case is, maybe the reason why they don't get the Malkus and they have to pay is because they didn't do the action. They just spoke, and it's not a real action. Elagamar mitavayo. So what we're going to do here is we're going to join the two together. In other words, we don't have a source from either one, from Chayvel, which is the one that damages, or from the Eidim Zayman, those types of witnesses that get disproven. We don't have a source from either one that there's really, when there's in every other case in the world, when there's both options in front of us, money, a payment, versus Malkus, that there's going to be the payment of money. Because those cases are different. Those two are different. Well, if we put the two together, Elagamar mitavayo, let's learn from both of them together. This is another type of comparison. It's called a tzad hashava. Ma tzad hashava shabem dikam mamano malkus meina mashal milkalei laki. What's the common factor between the two of them? That you have to pay and you don't get malkus. Afkal hecha dikam mamano malkus meina mashal milkalei laki. Also by every other case. You avoid the uniqueness of each case by joining it together, and then you say, well, look, this case doesn't have what that one has, and you still have to pay. And that case doesn't have what this one has, and he still has to pay. So you join it together, and then you get the this is how they do studies, and scientific studies. They put a bunch of things together. Each one had its own reason why the medicine didn't work, or whatever. They throw them all together. Why it doesn't?
So you're
Throw them all together, and they say, well, the common factor of all of them is that it worked.
You're applying payment and Malkus together for any case, like a one size fits all.
What we're gonna do is that since we have two cases
Mhm.
where there's an option of payment and Malkus, And
Right.
what we do is just payment, no malchus.
Mhm.
So too, whenever we have a case of payment and malchus, we'll do just payment, no malchus. Okay, the Gemara says, "Malat tzad hashavashrim shekein yesh b'hem tzad chomer." But one second, each one of them has a stringency in that payment. First of all, one of them has to pay 5 times, and the other one has to pay even if he wasn't warned. Vima minor lakula, and if you want to just say that we're not looking at the stringency, we're looking at the more lenient one. Shken yesh b'hem tzad hakal. Each one of them has a leniency. What was the leniency? Well, one of them didn't do an action, and the other one, it's permissible in court for that to be done. Ella ula tachas kamar. Ula learns from tachas. That's a Gezer Shabbat. He has a biblical source. Well, Ksiv Hacha, it says in one place, tachas asherina, because she was pained, talking about the girl that was raped. Ksiv Hasam ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye, right? Which we know what that means. It means payment, right? The payment of is lost in value. Ma hasam mayna mishalim milkalei lucky. Afkal hechadika mayna o malkas mayna mishalim milkalei lucky. Just like when someone damages another person, there could have been an option of getting malchus, and there could be an option of also payment. What does he have to do? He only has the payment. So too, when it comes to the fine by the girl that gets raped, all there is the fine and not the malchus. Whenever there's the possible fine, they don't get the malchus. Whenever there's no fine, then they get the malchus. That's how Ula resolved the contradiction between those two Mishnayos. Rabbi Yochanan,
But what
Amar.
Kelly said, can the malchus replace kares?
That's another story. I forget where we had that, but there is a possibility of malchus replacing kares. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Yochanan says, "Afilu tema achesinara." We don't have to say that the ages were different and that's why there's no fine. We could say that we're dealing with exactly the same story, but kanshi hisrbai, kanshi hisrbai. It depends if he was warned. If he was warned, then there's the malchus, and if he wasn't warned, then there's just the fine. Alma kasava Rabbi Yochanan. From this, we see that Rabbi Yochanan holds kol hechadika mamana malchus. If you have both options, payment versus lashes, va'asrubei, and there was warning, milkalakim and minole mishalim, that he only gets malchus and he doesn't have to pay money. Now the Gemara is going to do exactly what it did to Ula, but it's going to ask on Rabbi Yochanan. Really, Rabbi Yochanan is like the teacher of Ula. Ula was the traveler. Rabbi Yochanan was the teacher in Israel. And Ula would bring the statements of Rabbi Yochanan back and forth. So it's interesting that we have this. Where does Rabbi Yochanan know that the malchus takes the precedent, is the one that's going to happen? He's going to get lashed. He's not going to have to pay. Amar Kra, he has a pasuk. It says Kadei Rishasei. It says that he's hit. This is by the malchus. It's he only gets 39. He gets 39 malchus according to his sin, right? Mishum rishachas atem achayv v'yatem achayv mishum shtei rishayis. The samach le'abayim yakenu. It says that means that if there's 2 prohibitions being performed at the same time, he only gets malchus for one of them, and then it says that he gets 40 malchus. What happens over here? Someone hits his friend malchus. That there's money in malchus. In that case, that's a disproving of this. Oh, in other words, I had 2 possibilities. I had money or malchus. And it says Kadei Rishachas, he only gets 1 punishment. And then right away the pasuk says Arbaim Yakenu. What's the punishment that he gets? The 40 malchus. So when there's an option of money or malchus, he ends up getting the malchus. When you read
Even though
further,
it's 39.
yeah. Arbaim Yakenu means 39. Yeah, which means that when there are 2 prohibitions or 2 things that are 2 violations being performed, he's going to get the malchus and not have the monetary fine. Gemara says, 1 second. What about chayvel b'chaveri? What about if he damages his friend? Then over there he has the monetary fine and not the malchus. It's a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe we're talking about they didn't warn him. That's why he has to pay. But if they did warn him, then he would get malchus and he would not have to pay. Right? That would be a way of hurting someone, not having to pay,
I feel like
because he has two witnesses warn him before he hurts him.
stricter laws to be applied if he's warned.
Right. Which would mean the malchus would be stricter than the money. That's what we're thinking here. The problem with saying that is that the difference is with warning is because Rabbi Ami says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan himself, Rabbi Yechanan, that if he hits his friend in a way that it doesn't have a shava pruta of damage. A shava pruta is the smallest amount of coin of damage. There was no, he hit him with a, I don't know, something that's not noticeable, or, what would a case be?
Hello.
Yeah, he banged him on his fingernail, something, so there's no, it doesn't cause a damage of a shava pruta. Over there he gets malchus. Okay, now, why does that affect anything? So we have to analyze what happened. Hey Chidami, how does he get malchus? If he wasn't warned at all before he hit him, so am I like it? So why is there malchus? There's never malchus without warning. You just have to warn him. You have to warn him that if you continue to do this, there's going to be malchus. It must be that he was warned. B'taima, and the reason why he's getting malchus here, the less shava pruta, is because the damage that the person caused did not have a monetary value. That damage was so small, insignificant, that it was less than the value of a pruta, and that's why he's getting malchus. But now this implies, but let's say it did have a monetary value, that damage, then he would have to pay money, and he would not get malchus. Now, what was our case? Our case was when he was warned. So that means that even when he's warned, there still is a monetary payment. Now, how did Rabbi Yechanan make a difference? How did Rabbi Yechanan make a difference? How did he resolve the two Mishnayos? There was a contradiction. That one of them we say that there's a monetary payment, and one of them we say that there's malchus. We said that the one that had malchus was because he was warned. The one the monetary payment was not warned. Now we just proved that even if he was warned, there would still be a monetary payment. Because why was there malchus? Only because there was no monetary value loss. There was no loss of monetary value. If there was a loss, then he would have to pay, even though he was warned. The Kasha and Rabbi Yechanan. The Gemara answers, yeah. Kedam Rabbi Lai taught the Feir Shribs Torah Edim Zaymin LaTashlumen. Achanami Feir Shribs Torah Chayvel B'Chaver Tashlumen. I have a special rule. The Torah says clearly that Edim Zaymin have to pay, that they don't get malchus. If that's the case, then I have a special rule that when someone damages his friend, he has to pay and he doesn't get malchus. But in all other cases, there's going to be malchus in that payment. Where did we learn that? On the following case. There's probably a brisa. We testify that so-and-so owes his friend 200 coins. And it comes out that there's zaymim. Those people that testified were not really, they were conspiring. So like an umishalman, they're flogged, and they also have to pay. Reb Meir holds that there's two prohibitions there. First of all, they testified falsely, and second of all, there was a monetary loss that they caused. So there's like an umishalman. Well, we were discussing the whole time. Reb Meir threw us off for a second, but we were discussing the opinion of the Chachamim that hold that you don't get two punishments. You say anyone that has to pay doesn't get malchus. Why does he say maybe say anyone that gets malchus doesn't pay? Why do you say anyone that pays doesn't get malchus? That's where Rabbi Lai's statement was. The reason why was because we have a rule that the Edom, the Torah says that Edom Zayim pay as opposed to malchus. Where did the Torah get this from? where does we are in the Torah, not where does Torah get it? We are in the Torah. Do we see this? Michti. Let's see. Ksiva sisam lekashazam lasas leochem. Says that we do to them what they wanted to do to their friend. Exactly what they were conspiring to do. That's what we do to them. Yad biyad lamali. What does it have to say? A hand for a hand. Davar nitn miyad liyad. It's talking about that's something that's handed from hand to hand. Mayni mammon. Also that, and that's referring to money. Chivel b'chaver nami michti. It says ksiv kasher asa keni asalai keni nasim by lamali. Why does it have to say another? It also says so we should give to him. That means that if someone damages his friend, we have that same limud that says that the Torah tells us that he has to do payment as opposed to lashes. Rabbi Yechanan, my time Kula. Why doesn't Rabbi Yechanan learn like Ula? Ula said that the difference was the age. Depends if there was a fine. If there was a fine, then there's no malchus. Rabbi Yechanan says if there's malchus, then there's no payment. He said it the opposite. Why doesn't Rabbi Yechanan say like Ula that if there's a fine, there's no malchus? It says Imkain batalta erba sacheiska leisegale. I have a pasuk that says that he's not allowed to have relations with his sister. That pasuk tells me that there's lashes. According to Ula, if there's a fine, there's no lashes. It's going to go away. Rabbi Yechanan doesn't want to say that. Rabbi Yechanan wants to say that if he warned him, then there would be lashes. Well, the Gemara asks on Rabbi Yechanan, if you're so worried about that pasuk that you're never going to have that prohibition with lashes, chayvel b'chaver nami. Imkain betalta la Yosef, pen Yosef. When someone damages his friend, you have the same story. We have a verse that says you shall not hit him more, any extra. And I have the person violated prohibition. If he's warned, he shouldn't, according to Rabbi Yochanan, there's no, over there, there's no malchus. What are you doing? But you're nullifying, you're taking away that rule. And also by Edom Zaim, you're taking away the rule that someone that testifies falsely should get malchus. So the truth is that by Edom Zaim, I have another case of malchus. Let's see, someone testifies about his friend, two witnesses testify that he's not a real Kohen. His mother was a Gerusha. And then we find out that, how do you know that she was a Gerusha? You claim that you were at the divorce. You weren't even around when she got divorced. You were in somewhere else. So Edom Zaim. So now what do? Do we say that this guy is now a chalal? These Edom are now chalalim. They're not real Kohanim because we do to them what they wanted to do? No, we give them malchus. So I have a rule of giving Edom Zaim and malchus in one scenario, which means that we do apply that rule there. Also, I have a case where I can actually give malchus for someone that's chayvel, someone that damages his friend. What is that? When he doesn't cause the loss of a shava pruta. The Gemara says, if that's the case, then I can have the case of knas. It's a back question on Rabbi Yechanan. I have a case of knas. Why? If the girl is over 12 and a half, there's no knas there, and there'll be the malchus. Why do you have to tell me that in that case I need to have the malchus? I need to have the knas because I'm. Yeah, well, you said why does Rabbi Yochanan say that I need to have that there should be malchus if they were warned? I anyways have a case of malchus even with it would be with warning, but I don't have to take away the malchus from someone under 12. The real reason why Rabbi Yechanan doesn't learn like Ula is because he takes Ula's pasuk that has an extra word of tachas, and he says, I need it for something else. It says, it says in place of her being pained, that's telling me that besides for the fine of the 50 coins that he has to pay, he also has to pay Baishas Pagam. And that's what Rabbi Yechanan does for that. V'ula, what about Ula? Nafkalei midirava, he has another source. Ula has another source. He learns from somewhere else. But because Rabbi Yochanan uses the source that Ula has to tell me that there's no Malkus, Rabbi Yochanan uses it to tell me that there's Bais Pagam. So Rabbi Yochanan says that there's really no Malkus by a case of a knas, even if there was there's no. He says that if there was warning, then there would be Malkus. If there was warning, then there would be Malkus. And he can't say that the Malkus is talking about only when she's a begeres. Okay.
Wow.
Let's leave it over here.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day, Eli.
Have a good day.
How was your fast?
Baruch Hashem.